I would like to call something to your attention that I'm sure you have heard many times before, and have read about it many times and have studied it. And this will only be another time, but I call it to your attention because just as we began with the here of awareness, this consciousness, this being conscious, so also as appearances go, we start with the now. And I would like to call your attention just for a minute to what we call the now. Now, you see, is really all that we're ever concerned with. This now moment, now, right here, right now. This is the point where tangibility is real, that is, where tangibility exists. In this here and now is where we smell the rose, where we see the child, the loved one. Feeling is a matter of the here and now. Well, now is all we're really concerned with. And yet humanity is, as appearances go, humanity is constantly worrying about what is not now, but what is tomorrow, what's going to happen at the office when I get down there tomorrow, what will happen when this letter is read, what's going to happen when this bill becomes due, what about the payment next month. Yet, the now is what we are constantly concerned with. The now. And now is all that we're concerned with. And for just a minute, why don't we consider this, all here gathered together? Is it not always now? When do we hear a sound? When do we say, you hear Bill? If you don't say now. Right now is the time that we are listening. And when do we see a sign? When do we see any image of perception? Is not the seeing always a matter of right now? Now, when do we worry, if we should worry about something? Or when do we feel an agony or an ache or a pain or a fear? Would we not say that that was now? Now, when do we do any dreaming of the future? We say a future exists. We're always told about what will transpire ultimately and what it will be like in the 21st century and so forth. But when is all of this speculating taking place? Is it not now? What about memories, our concern with the past? Something awful that happened yesterday with son or daughter, or minister, or... When do we think about that? But now. This now, right now, is the one we're talking about. This now is really eternal. This now, is this whistle up here bothering anybody? If it is, I'll turn it on. Good. This now is the moment that we're concerned with. And I can tell you that the now is always perfect. The now is always perfect. Perfect. There is nothing wrong with the now. It never is. What has humanity, what has education done to the now? It has wedged it in between a future that extends infinitely in one direction and a past that extends infinitely in the other, or almost. They say the universe is about 3 billion, is that it? 3 billion years old? Very interesting thing in this regard. Just recently, our physicists and astronomers have come up with a way to age the universe. And this age is calculated by measuring what's called the red shift in some of the light that is perceived from outer space. Very interesting thing with someone I know. They have just measured the red shift of a new galaxy that has been perceived. And lo and behold, they have found this red shift to be older than the universe. Well, I thought I'd toss that in. This is like looking at your finger. You look at your finger and you say, "Whoa, this finger is older than I am." So, science is perceiving many interesting things in this regard relative to time. The now is what we're concerned with. Awareness is always aware right here, right now. And if we can come in from the boondocks, if we can move out of this arena of worry about what's going to transpire, live this now moment, we will find that now goes from now to now most perfectly and most beautifully, and without all of the previous manipulation and planning and calculating that we've been giving it. Now, when we do this, it would appear that sometimes we're giving up an awful lot. We say, but I don't want to give up all the memories of my youth. Let me tell you, this now excludes nothing. This now moment is infinitely greater than it appears. It's certainly a lot more than a razor's edge along some sort of a sliding scale between past and future. And as we live a simple, credulous, innocent, uninhibited awareness right here, right now, you will find that the now expands. I don't know what other word to use. It only appears to expand. It is that we begin to perceive it in its bigness. Furthermore, this now moment of awareness is eternal. There is no end of it. It will never stop. Nothing can happen to awareness itself. The body might get smashed. It makes no difference. Awareness goes right on being aware. Not even an instant's hesitation. This now is what we should be concerned with. We find that so far as human agony goes, comes from a worry, not about the now. You know, the bill has not just come in. It isn't. We're not looking. We're not in the Donnie book that transpired at the office right now. This now is fine. Right here, right now. This now is the one we're talking about. It's perfect. There is nothing here missing or necessary. Awareness is being perfectly aware right now, and all that appeared in time to be necessary for awareness to be aware has certainly been present, or else awareness would not be aware right here, right now, would it? So therefore, this awareness is sufficient unto itself. It doesn't need anything. There's no one hungry here at the minute. There's no one starved. There is nobody knocking on the door or getting ready to foreclose a mortgage. There is no death going on. There is no dying going on. This now is just being itself very beautifully and very perfectly. Right now. So the now really is what we're concerned with. And this is such a simple thing. This is something that is so readily communicated to anybody. You can tell someone who knows nothing whatever about what we call metaphysics or the truth or philosophy or theology. You can say, well, now just stop and consider this now just a minute. Really, why are you worrying about what's going to happen tomorrow? This now is what we're concerned with. Now is when things are tangible. Now is when we actually touch the rose. This is now is when we see the sunlight. Now is when we feel love. Now is the time that we're concerned with. This now, here and now. Jesus said, behold, now is the day of salvation. He began his ministry. He began a ministry by saying, behold, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. What do you mean at hand? Now. He said the kingdom of heaven is spread out across the whole face of the land. Now. But men perceive it not. He said, you know how to worry about what's going to happen tomorrow, the next day. You know how to test the signs, but you do not know how to test this now. All right, so we're talking about this now, not another now. We're talking about right now, here now. And this is where wisdom is. This is where intelligence is, right here, right now. The here, the now, and awareness. This awareness is being all there is to what's called here, what's called now. It's included within awareness. Where does time come from? Want to know about time? When we conceive ourselves as an image within awareness rather than awareness itself, when we look at ourselves as a little block within awareness, as a body floating around in space or something like that, then we have time immediately because we have to measure the distance from that body to the next. And all time is a measure of distance. We can come out and be separate from the world's clock right here, right now, by living this here, this now. And simply seeing what appear to be distances. This doesn't mean that we do away with our watches and throw them away. This doesn't mean that we quit telling people what time it is. It doesn't mean that we go around talking about the unreality of time. No, it means simply that we use time as a name to affix to this. No, that's all. But we are not bound by this thing called time. Whatever. When we perceive ourselves to be awareness itself and not an image within awareness. I like to use an illustration that's very enlightening. It's kind of nutty, but it's enlightening. See, a television set is the only thing in all existence. Like when we began the hour, we said, perceive the universe in its singleness, in its totality, the universe. The seeing the unseen universe, all it is, see it in its singleness, in its oneness. Well, see this then as a television set. Call it a television set. Now, the television set has one purpose, and that's to function, isn't it? And as it functions, what does it do? It has images on the screen. Well, we leave the television set for just a minute and perceive the universe in the old theological term as mind. Which it is. Mind, consciousness, God. God has one purpose, and that is to be, or to know His own being. To function as itself. To perceive itself as itself. Mind certainly has one function, and that is to be aware. Well, what can a singleness be aware of but itself? Isness perceiving itself. Television set functioning with images on the screen. In the same, we're using this illustration. All right? If we identify this functioning itself as not the screen itself, but as an image on the screen, we find ourselves all wrapped up in the goings-on among the images, in the names of the images, and the distances between the images, and the importance of them, and their activity, and whether they're good or bad, whether they're tall or short, or whether they're male or female, or what. We're all wrapped up in the images, are we not? Because we have construed ourselves to be one image, and we are looking out at an infinity of images and seeing them out there. We have limited ourselves to the most infinitesimal thing we could possibly do. A ridiculous, little, small, nothing, an image on a screen. On the other hand, this has not altered the truth that there is the television set functioning with the screen, functioning and showing forth all of the images. Well, right here, right now, this awareness, is it not always forever perceiving things? Are we not always seeing moving images and expanding things and growing things and blooming things and happy things and all sorts of things within awareness? Is this not always going on? Is it not almost always a perception of images? And have we not always, for some silly reason, well, not really a silly reason, but for one reason or another, construed ourselves to be just one of those images, one among many, with a name, with rank or something, first or last, well, yet awareness all the while has been being aware. That is, images have been constantly being perceived within consciousness. So awareness has just been going on about its business all the while. Well, awareness then, to assume the identity as awareness itself, and not as the image, is not to do away with the image or boot it in the rear end or get rid of it or anything. It's to simply see the image as an image, but it means that an identity seems to shift from a very infinitesimal thing to the screen, to a bigger thing, to the biggest thing of all, so far as consciousness goes. This awareness right here is all inclusive. It's infinite in scope. It is the functioning of mind. This is not to make a two-ness. We're not talking about a dualism here. We're not talking about a television set and its images. We're talking about a television set functioning. Can you separate the functioning from the television set? Can you separate awareness from mind? Is not mind in its action of being itself being aware? We're not talking about two here. We're not talking about mind and awareness. We're talking about mind being all there is to awareness. Mind functioning as awareness. This isn't dualism. Oh, how the absolutists here and there nail me to the wall and say, "Oh, Bill, you're talking pure duality, and this is not absolute enough for me." And well, I know that within this perception, as I perceive this, and using this illustration, that I can clearly point out the singleness of God, or mind functioning as itself, perceiving itself, but by the same token, avoiding the most gruesome pitfall of all, for metaphysicians especially. But for all, as appearances go, it's just part of the phase of a bud blooming, of equating oneself with God. That is, trying to be God. After all, the little ego, what appears to be humanity right now, is busy about the business of being God. There are many philosophies that are just coming out now that equate man with God. They will try to lift up an illusory identity, a fictitious identity, and make it the equivalent of God. We'll get into this later in more detail. But by use of this illustration, when we conceive a television set functioning as itself, we can always say that the functioning and the television set are all one television set. But we can clearly, and we can say that this is not two. We do not have, we can see that the functioning and the television, the functioning is the total action of the television set. But we can clearly see that the functioning of itself is nothing. That the functioning is the action of the television. Now within, and I walk down this merry
Could you repeat that statement? The functioning of itself is nothing.
The functioning of itself
is nothing.
Is, well, perhaps, yes, is nothing. Of itself, that is no power or importance in itself, as itself, by itself. Let me use another.
I'm lost for a moment.
All right, I'll come back. I'll not leave this point because of all the points to present, and the one that with which I contended the longest. And as a result of this contention, it's a point that I feel most strongly to make clear. Let me begin using along a new line. There is, as we progress along the metaphysical pathways, and excuse me for using this word of progression, because you bear in mind reality already is the fact, and identity is already the fact, and what we're not doing is progressing. What we're really doing is letting go of the misconceptions and to leave or to reveal the pristine identity that is already the fact. This is what we're doing, as opposed to trying to walk along a pathway from pillar to post or stepping stone to stepping stone. If there is somewhere along this pathway a point at which one suddenly sees the singleness of God and says, therefore, I am God. And many, as you know, many absolute books are written like this. There is this great equation. Well, after all, I am God and not man, as it's put in the Bible. Well, how very near the truth this is. But how filled with agony such a view is if we are talking about a personal identity. If we're still talking about a misconception, if we're still talking about a personality, and if that personality, and if this is what we are still construing ourselves as and living out as, and say, I am God, well then, nothing but the greatest agony presents itself in such a view. Now the point is that we began with the singleness, the totality of mind. And we see that the total functioning of mind is to be self-aware. Mind being self-aware. This awareness is that. This identity I am, right here, right now, is that awareness going on. But never can I say that this awareness is mine. Only can I honestly say that mind is being this awareness. Please, you people, if you can get that point, I can tell you, you will save yourself more grief than anything you can imagine. Because God is being this one we are. And we are not being God. And we're not playing at the role of being God. You see, Jesus was explicit in this regard. When we talk about Jesus, what are we doing? We're only talking about an image within this awareness that we have said, well, it appears that some illumination or light comes through as that. Just as we can take a certain book off the shelf and say, well, here, this is a dictionary, and it gives me light relative to word. And so when we talk about Jesus, this awareness is the one we're concerned with, and where is the one called Jesus? Except as an image or an idea with a name, but within this awareness, and so yes, we can go there for light, just as we go to a book. But this one, Jesus was very clear and explicit in this regard. He says, my Father and I are one, but my Father is greater. We're not creating a dualism here. The sun is being all there is to the rays of light, but never can I say that the rays of light is all there is to the sun. I don't have the sun and rays of light. I can say simply that the sun is being all there is to the rays of light. I'm not creating a dualism. I can say that mind is being this awareness I am. And certainly this isn't two, because this is the total function of mind. This is the total function of God. This is all I'm assuming an identity infinitely greater than that of the human. You know. Yet never can I say that this awareness is all there is to God. God, rather, is being this awareness I am. God is being this life. Yet God is infinitely more than just this awareness that you will come to perceive as you live as awareness of God. Have I made my point clear? Somewhere along the line, I stepped off in my study, and as I told some of you people yesterday, as we study and become more and more, as to use the word absolute, we find ourselves suddenly all tied up, infinitely more bound than we ever were. As we first moved into a quest of truth, it seemed that we were wide open and free to listen to many ideas. And as we move along this line of so-called progression and find ourselves becoming very absolute, while we're even bound by what appear to be the Word, we don't even dare use certain terms, for fear that some other absolutist would say, aha, that's very relative. Listen to that discussion of death. When there is no death, why would he even make mention of it? And listen to this illustration, which is clearly dualistic. Why? There is no such thing as dualism. There is just God being God. And so why in the world would he? So we find ourselves terribly bound. And yet, as we finally get back to honesty, we find that we suddenly are free to go and use those terms that appear to communicate. Because actually, who are we communicating with? Are we trying to impress anybody? Is this one that we look out there and so therefore I want to use such and such a term? Is this, to impress someone out there? Who are we looking at except the self being I? Who is it that we ever see except the infinite appearing of infinite awareness? This awareness I am, appearing infinitely as others out there. So, if I try to pull the wool over somebody's eyes out there, I'm only fooling myself. Isn't this so? If I put on the dog and act dishonestly here, who am I fooling except myself? So we don't fight. There in Mountain Book, I've learned the value of coming down when we communicate, as we talk one to another, use whatever term comes to mind, because just because somebody uses such and such a term or phrase, we all know, you feel within what is meant and what is suggested. There is this feeling that is beyond words. There is this communication that is infinitely more than words. And yet, as we are prone terribly at times with our studies to get hung up on just the absolute expression. And as I told some of you folks yesterday, there was a time in this experience I had that I suddenly found myself unable to communicate. I was like a poet, and if you've ever read any modern day verse, you know that most poets, the modern variety, only write to other poets. Who else can understand what they're saying? So what good is it if you make an expression that is limited to so few? And by the same token, you artists pardon me, but very often some of the most modern art that appears, doesn't seem much to me, seems to be a statement only to other artists. So what good is a dissertation, an expression, if it does not communicate gently to everyone? And as I told you, this experience that I had of a little boy coming out of the woods, and the father and the son the father was convinced the little boy was lost and died in the woods. And when they met, the communication between father and son was just hallelujah, tears, and the little boy yelling, Daddy, Daddy. Scratched from head to foot with briars, nose running, and tears all over him. This was communication with only Daddy, Daddy, and hallelujah going on. And so our communication can come back home to simplicity. We can come out of this great erudite world of sophistication where we're trying to impress everybody. We can come back to simplicity because simplicity is where the truth is. The truth is inevitably simplified, not complicated. It's here, so apparent and so plain, is to be hidden within its simplicity. This is why in our writing exercises, I ask that the people, if they will, after the statement comes, if the flow, I would like to mention this, it was mentioned to me this morning, we don't have to write a single sentence and then go over it and try to clarify it. If in the process of writing, as one sits down to write, if there's a flow of thoughts, put them all down. Great, because during this time you are opening, you're not playing the role of the ego at this moment. You're not playing the role of the fraud. You are simply listening within. So go ahead and write. If it appears that the ideas are not coming forth, then write the absolute sentence, even if it's an academic statement. And even if this is, and very often it starts this way, because very often we never sit down to do this until we feel some grief, and we say, well, good, I'll sit down and write, because old Bill tells me that while I'm writing I won't be worrying, so I'll try it out. Okay. So at this time, there's no flow there, but you can write the academic statement, that reality is being the all-hand, or whatever. Then, if there is no flow, you can take that sentence and put it in the simplest terms you can. Restate it. And may I say this about simplicity. Awareness is very childlike. As we come back home to the identity we are, which is this simple, credulous, beholding awareness, for which there is no personal responsibility because God is being this awareness, this life. As we come back home to the simplicity, we find that we began to re-enjoy the simple things, the childlike. We find that we began to re-see the things that we saw as young. And I tell you that what we find is that everyone that we look at, everybody you see, I don't care who it is nothing but a little boy or a little girl. This is so. We are children. And only children are that we are. This is the child that we're concerned with. This one I am. And we do find that we come back home to childlikeness, not childishness, but childlikeness. And we find that a body inevitably follows suit. There are a whole bunch of you people in here today that didn't sleep last night, but just a little bit. And I could have told you wouldn't, and yet this morning you're very refreshed, strangely refreshed. I could have told you that too. Awareness is the action of God. It is the eternal action going on. There is no expenditure of energy so far as awareness is concerned. There is no inputting a bit of energy that has to be accumulated and discharged. This is the human concept, and this isn't going on. Awareness is the total action of God, and I can't conceive of isness or eternity or that which is being the all of existence, becoming fatigued or worn out. This awareness itself doesn't age. And you will find that as we come back home to the child we are, that we're coming back home to the most beautiful simplicity that you can imagine. And so when you write, here's a little, I don't know why I do. I just feel that this word should be very practical, and so I give you all these silly little things that appear to be things that I've done. For whatever it's worth, whether you do it or not, that's your business. But I found that as I wrote, suddenly I became aware that of the real child that am I. I use that expression child, meaning identity, I guess, but the simple child. Then, somehow in my mind's eye, I visualized after I wrote my little sentence as I was sitting down to write, I said, well now, does this say anything to a child? And I would visualize a child, a little wide-eyed, eager child in the first grade sitting there bug-eyed, looking at their first grade teacher, great momentous day. Well, does this sentence really communicate? Does this child understand this? And if so, what would the child ask about it? Then I would answer the question I felt that this child would ask. And let me tell you that when you in your mind's eye, as you write, have communicated to the child you are, to a mental or to a fictitious, or whatever you want to call it, to the child, when you have communicated to that one, I tell you what you will have found. You will find that when you stand up or when you stop, that you will feel so elevated and uplifted and refreshed. It's to be unbelievable. And you will find also that those very words that you've written there will stand you in good store. Because those are the words that began to become the tangible things that have come from the inside to begin to make changes in a tangible, here and now, experience that we call the day-to-day thing. So as you write, think of this child you are. Or just think of the child. Talk to that one. Use the terms that communicate. Tend ever toward simplicity, not complexity, because it is the ego, the old identity. It's the man that would vaunt himself so, consider himself high and mighty and something of a power and importance of his own. It's that one that tends towards complexity and division and ever a wider range of things to study and be concerned with. And yet I think that you will find that all of the great ideas that have presented themselves in this human experience have come forth out of childlike simplicity. Illumination always occurs at that moment when the ego just gives up in great frustration or agony or despair or something. It gives up. And for a moment one stands naked, like a child. And at that point we find ourselves with the ability to use it, to come up with a word. For those of you who are physicists and chemists and who are engaged in such activities, this does not mean that we stop all that. This doesn't mean that the search doesn't continue and go on. It just means that our values are shifting gently from a concern with the things and the value and the power there to that which is being the thing. The things are still there, but they become harmoniously arranged within our experience when we quit giving them the power and importance that they don't have. Please, now somebody ask me a question. Yes.
Would you state again what the change has been in the Army's way of teaching?
Yes. The Army has not made these changes, but they're proposed. And it's just, these changes, the question was, to state again what the changes were the Army proposes in this matter of communication. Oh, I haven't even touched on many of the interesting things they found. But as metaphysicians, you will understand in the twinkling of an eye. One thing was that it is not necessarily the comfort and so forth of what appears to be the students out there that's so darn important. Rather, it is what appears to be the condition or state of mind of that one which is doing the communicating and talking. This is interesting. Why? And why do we know this to be the fact? Because you see, really, we're never talking to one, but this one we are. We're only looking at our own images. We can quit being so darn concerned about the images out there and let's be this one here honestly. And then we will see our images as they really are and then know what to tell them. Or what, if they ask us a question, we'll know what to say. The Army has, as I say, they've discovered the idiocy of long lectures like this 2-hour thing here. They see the importance of just presenting single points and then letting everybody kick it around and mull it over. And this is what we do at Mountain Brook. And the The comfort of the students, what else? Something impressed me. Well, if it comes to mind, okay. Anyone? Let me say this, all of you engaged in public speaking, when it's such a simple thing to suddenly perceive that those that you're getting ready to talk to are none other than yourself. And away goes such silly things as stage fright or concern for this, that, and the other thing. You find yourself being able to be articulate in places that you never were before. When it comes to lowering the boom to what appears to be a mistake or someone who is pulling the wool over your eyes or where there appears to be dishonesty or something, if it comes to you as necessary to say, there will no longer be any trepidation about it. You'll say it because you know you're talking to yourself. And if it appears that, where you have been, oh, here comes old John, and oh, what a temper this man's going to tear me up. When suddenly you perceive that you're never looking at one other than yourself, you can suddenly find that that one out there may huff and puff and blow, but never is the self going to do the self in. And you find yourself with just not a healing one, necessary to do one healing right after the other and correct this situation and the other. To live the identity we are, we find multitudes of healings appearing. That is, a multitude of illusions falling away. Not starting from the bottom as a personality and trying to lift it up to God and correct everything in its experience and bit by bit acquire wisdom, but beginning with the infinity that isness is and watching all of the illusions disappear by the truckload. Things that you have never dreamt of happen. Dion, you must have a question. You must want to ask me something.
All right, I'd like you to go to the illustration of the television set and equate awareness.
All right. To go over the illustration of the television set, very helpful. If you can see a television set in its totality, in its oneness, there, incidentally, we can find the explanation of the Trinity that has inevitably presented itself throughout all theology and throughout all religious history. And you will find that none who were genuinely enlightened ever denied the existence of a strange and beautiful threeness that was one. Well, here we see a single television set functioning with the image, or mind perceiving itself. Mind seeing what mind is. We see this beautiful Trinity presenting just so simple. There's nothing profound about it. This television set functioning. Now, heretofore we have perceived ourselves as finite images ricocheting around in a world where we have to contend for ourselves and so forth, when all the while we have been the screen on which the images appear. This does not mean that we're denying the images, and most especially not denying the one we call the body. But we see our allegiance shifting from an identification that we have considered to be an image on the screen, a thing in the world, to be the perception, the perceiving, the screen itself, on which all the images, within which all the images live and move and have their being. And then we see that so far as the screen itself is concerned, the screen has no responsibility of its own. Rather, a total television set as being all there is to the screen. Yes?
Function and isness is not synonymous things.
No, I don't see it as a synonymous term. I see function as the activity or the action of isness. But isness is ineffable. It is beyond the words. Who can say what?
Then I like your illustration of the sun and its rays. I have the feeling there, whereas I do not get in television. I am confused by the idea of the screen, the images appearing on it, whereas the sun and the ray coming out.
Well, thank you. Yes,
No,
I have used the illustration.
For me only.
Well, I appreciate the point you make. I am using the television set illustration simply because it allows me to get the Trinity, the so-called Trinity in there. The three that are one. There is, for example, right here, right now, as this consciousness, there is isness being this life we are. And this life we are is continually perceiving things. And yesterday we discussed what are things but the qualities and the attributes of isness. What does singleness perceive except itself? But the itself that it perceives appears here to isness as qualities and attributes, or as the things we see. But never can we say that the thing is isness itself. We can only say that isness is being the thing. Just as surely as we can say that the lump of gold that we see is not gold itself, it's only a grouping of qualities and attributes that are perceived. We only see hardness and yellow and malleability and weight and all of that. This is what is perceived as awareness. But there is no gold in weight, and there is no gold in form, there is no gold in malleability. So right here now, let's bring that to this, so that it is significant. Awareness is being aware right here, right now. Isness is being this awareness. And this awareness is, isness is ever perceiving what it is. And the what isness is are the qualities and attributes we see appearing to us as trees and people, appearing as big and little, appearing as all of the things in the world. And this is why things exist, because isness is. This is why things are what they are, and why they are forever what they are. Now, that is the basic essence of things, ever remains. Physicists have pointed out, chemists have pointed out, that the energy that a thing is always this energy. We can never get rid of that. We may change a rock and beat it down into powder and so forth and so on. But ultimately we get down to the basic isness, which is energy, and that can't be seen, but it remains what it is. So we see then that things are things because their isness is perceiving itself. I have other illustrations that will bring this point out and will make it clear. I just think we're covering much too wide a range here for the first time. I don't want to bury everybody beneath a lot of words, because these ideas really are very gentle and very simple. And it's in the relaxing and in the gentle perception of it that they bloom. And you'll find yourself with seed that has been planted in generations past from all of your reading, beginning to bloom here during this experience. And all these things about illumination, all of that, which is the feeling of light, feeling of now I know, the feeling of gentleness, which is what illumination is. It's not the great blinding road to Damascus experience. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. It begins gently and simply. You will find all of that happening here, and don't be surprised. Because we are here to time all the loose ends together. We're finally coming to perceive what all of these things mean that we study. Because we've got to stop all the theory about it and all the study about it to begin being it and begin living it. If we want to see this thing called the tangible experience appear the harmony it really is. Yes.
Bill, you touched on something a few minutes ago that you talked more about yesterday, but you don't have any difficulty with it. When you hear something which is, well, you spoke of it yesterday as the liar who comes to the door. And so you stand and are what you are, say what you comes to you, but I'm confused here with not judging.
All right, thank you very much for bringing that up. We're going to have an entire session. One of the blocks will cover treatment, the thing called treatment. And I will go into this in some great detail, probably Benji, and because this point can be made very graphically clear. Yes, now, I'm glad that this thing about judgment is brought up. Let me just touch it now so that we can clear up the point. We find that an awful lot of agony comes about because we simply look at an image and call it good or bad. Or because we've been told that it was good or bad. Or because we buy somebody else's tale about it being good or bad, yet it's just an image out there. You know, someone can walk up the street and somebody can whisper in your ear and tell you that that is a criminal walking up the street, and suddenly, oh boy, you see him suddenly with the look of a criminal, and you clutch your pocketbook or something, and you get out of the way. But here, up until that point, you simply saw someone walking down the street. It was just an image. Well, it came to me as a point that has been presented historically throughout all of what we call time. It's very important. Judgment is the source of difficulty. When the Bible speaks of the last judgment, the Bible really has reference to when we end judgment right here is I. Now, we can look at an image and not judge it. We don't have to call it good or bad. And when I use the term judgment in this work, and especially in my book, I haven't been as clear and explicit as I had hoped it would be. I have reference to the attachment of values to things. You know, the only reason a diamond is considered to have such a value of dollars attached to it is simply because the value of dollars has been attached to it. And the reason that has been done, I suppose, is because of its scarcity or something. But really, it's just a stone, isn't it? Carbon or something. And there are millions of pebbles on the beach, all kinds of stone everywhere, stone nearly as hard as diamond. But, of course, the diamond's very beautiful. But nonetheless, it was the attachment of value to it that has one taking his ring to a jeweler and making darn sure that that little stone doesn't fall out, and then grieving because somebody takes it and loses it, or steals it or something. It is our attachment of values to things that is the judgment that I have reference to. We can simply see things as things. We're not going to deny that there appears to be present as unfolding experience some sort of a hippie walking up the street, or a Donnybrook on an automobile accident or something that you're viewing. But I tell you, awareness is simply seeing the sign and is not attaching values to it. Now, there is a clear distinction between attaching values to the images of perception and making distinction. A distinction is a distinction, and they're perfectly legitimate. After all, we're not judging trees to call one an oak tree and one a pine tree. It simply happens that there appears to be an oak tree and a pine tree. This is not the kind of judgment that I have reference to. Oh yes, we find that as we live as awareness, unjudging awareness, our ability to distinguish increases enormously. You will find yourself making distinctions and seeing differences between, because after all, there is an infinity of appearance. Isness is infinite, and that which isness is, therefore, is infinite, and its appearing is infinitely appearing. This awareness is forever plumbing the depths of beauty that is in it, and will never come to an end in this view of it. This is all that we mean by eternity. But by judgment, we mean looking at things and calling them good or bad. The minute we call something good, then we have within us created everything that to acquire it, to adulate it, to praise it, cherish it, to love it, worship it, put it up on a pedestal, and then at the same time we have created, all kinds of agony if something happens to it. Wait until you see what beauty comes from looking at your family as this image of the boy. You say, oh my goodness, I can't do that. After all, this body image, this appearing is my son, and this one isn't. And so therefore, but wait until you see what happens. Suddenly you will find a love that far transcends this human attachment. Human feeling. But by judgment, the ending of judgment is just to see things as things, not denying. All of a sudden, those things that used to bug us, the things that we didn't like, are there, and we see them in a new light. We see them as not what before, as how they appeared before, but we see them more nearly as they are. And this is something that one can begin to do immediately. This is something that requires no long years of study and effort, no metaphysical know-how, no lot of stars in your crown. You can do this immediately. Just look at things as things. As you go on your meditative walks, as you go for a ride, or as you sit in a park or in your living room, and look at things intently, just see things as things, not as things that are valuable or not valuable, good or bad. And this is what I mean by the cessation of judgment. And in doing this, we find that the ability to distinguish increases, and this is not judgment. Yes?
At what point do you distinguish between judgment or non-judgment and preference or choice and discernment?
Well, last night we touched on this a bit. That's a wonderful question. First of all, we find that our choices have been humanly often wrong. And the reason our choices as to what course of action to pursue or as to what to do, the reason it was wrong was because of an attachment of value to something. Or because of this attachment of value, when suddenly something appeared awry, we felt a great agony or fear within ourselves. And because of this, then our choice was incorrect. We find that our ability to determine what course of action to pursue increases as we simply see the events without feeling the agony that's involved. When we take out the good or bad in what appears to be going on and just see what appears to be going on, our ability to know what to do about it increases. That's all. I don't know how else to put it in words. But that very fine point. Is that clear to those who were thinking along that line? Have I answered your question? Yes.
If you think of the oil spills that have happened on the water around Santa Barbara, if you judge it good or bad, I mean, if you can not judge it, but it is there, and a decision has to be made what to do about it. But doesn't that involve judgment?
No.
It doesn't.
No. Judgment, by judgment we mean the attachment of values.
But
Whether we call it good or bad. And this seems to be the source of an awful lot of agony within a personal experience. Now, if we can just look at the oil slick, if you can bring yourself to see that, well, so there's oil on the beach, and my property is right there, and my kids, and it's hurting the birds, and this, and that, and that, to see this is an event going on. You know, when we watch, all I can do here is to sort of answer your question with what appears to be an awful lot of beating around the bush. But let me use an illustration that may point out what I mean. We can watch horrendous events on a television screen in the way of a story that's going on, and we simply watch it and are entertained by it, but we don't become so engaged in the good or badness of it that we feel the agony. This is the point at which we began to view our universe. And in viewing our universe in this way, we see less and less that bothers us, or that we would contend with.
I may be able to watch it and separate myself from it, but someone down there who may have to do something about it.
All right.
I can see where I could...
Are you the one that must do something about it?
Oh, no.
All right, then here is this business of coming home to this one being I. What is the awareness with which we are concerned, and which is the view with which we are concerned? It is this one being I. This one right here. This is the house that we put in order. We make certain that we do and perceive and act as this one here should do and perceive and act. And as we do this, we find out, and you know the old idea, we have always been so anxious to go out and tell others what to do, or have been concerned with whether they do as we do or not, and have said if they do thus and so that doesn't agree with our concept that this is bad, and we've been very vociferous about it. And churches have been going out constantly and telling others about what to do and what not to do, and so have educational institutions, the old ego in general has been doing that. Well, here is the point at which we come home to this here and this now, and live this here and this now, without regard or regret for what appears to be going on out there. All I can say is we do this first. We see all mankind lifted, all mankind drawn unto me, as Jesus put it. When I am lifted up, all mankind shall be drawn unto me. So, as we live this awareness right here, we suddenly see that there is no agony going on out there, no great decisions that are being made there, really. It's not. It's much more of you here. There is a great deal of truth in the illustration of that we are watching. A superimposed series of events going on where it appears our images have attached all kinds of value to things, and because of that attached value, they're acting in one way or another, and so it's sort of a facade, sort of a big game being played out there. Well, let's us stop playing the game. Here is I. And we see the game then dissipate out there. Now, have I answered your question? Here, again and again, we must come home to this one being I. Constantly, we come home to the allness that God is, being this one I. The perfection that is this one here. We keep coming back to it. The minute you are concerned with the action and activity of those out there, whether what son is doing, or daughter, husband, wife, children, grandchildren, you are moving away from, you're moving out again to the things, to the images of perception. Our allegiance must, in this era, as appearances go, shift from a great attachment of value, a great concern with the thing, on the one hand, to the isness, which is being thing. And there is a beautiful and mysterious event that transpires. perhaps some of you who have heard about it. There is a beautiful experience called mystical union. The marriage of the two. It has been referred to as many experiences. Let me tell you, this event, as wonderful and monumental and inspiring as it is, and it's a self-event. It's like the blooming of a flower that one is. Never occurs while our allegiance is entirely devoted to things, while we're still attaching value to them. It's as awareness perceives that which is being, perceives that which is being awareness. As one's attention shifts from things to God, in very simple theological terms. And bear in mind, that which helps us perceive this point and live it and be it is the fact that we recognize that God is the actor on the scene. It is God being this awareness. It is God's action of whether things are being perceived and the action is there, or whether a perception of isness, being things, is taking place. So there is no human responding. It's our knowledge that this is really the action and that there is no real human actor on the scene. It's our knowledge of this that allows us to do it. Because no human can ever do such a thing. No ego is ever going to do that which does away with an ego. Macbeth on the stage is never going to do that which ends Macbeth on the stage, because after all he says, my gosh, I've got to stay on stage or I have no existence. And no shadow is ever going to do anything that is never going to put itself in the light or allow the light to do away with the shadow. Not if the shadow, but there is no power in the shadow. There is no power in the ego. There's only power in this being, this awareness. This awareness is the total power of God. This awareness that right here, right now, here's old Bill, is getting fatigued, I suppose, because we've done too much talking. This awareness is the action of God. Now let's let that conclude this session, and I thank all of you, and I hope you heard something that was helpful.
Thank you.